Mr. Sean Riley. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you, man?
Good. It's evening for me, so thank you very much. I know you're about 13 hours behind where I am, so 6
Yeah.
a.m. I believe. Luckily, you seem to be a morning person, or maybe you don't have a choice.
That's exactly it. There is no choice anymore. Between the kids and the dogs, I'm a morning person now.
Okay. Oh, have you not always been like that before you had the dogs?
It's mostly the kids. They're all in competitive sports, so they have early morning training half the week. So I just get up the other half of the week on my own and do my own stuff. Otherwise, you feel jet lagged every day.
Yeah. Well, yeah, at least you have a nice, I'm assuming because you're in Canada, in Toronto, you must have a nice warm fire to come home to at the end of the day. At least that does make up for the early mornings and, late afternoons, I imagine.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do have all the creature comforts and whatnot. And when it's been a miserable winter like this one, we've had a lot of -20s over the last
Ouch.
couple of weeks. Yeah, it's really cold, bitterly cold. I'm feeling it so much this year. When you come in, it is very nice just to settle down, enjoy the warmth, and relax. And then somebody says, "Dad," and then, okay, I'll get up again. So I treasure those few seconds.
Okay, so actually, that's a very nice way to begin in the sense that we are now talking about your life in Canada. But obviously, you and I met about 15 years ago when you were out on Southeast Asia side, where you had spent a lot of your time within healthcare advertising. So let's start with Sean Riley, who is the executive creative director of IPG Health Canada, based in Toronto. Um, you are actually, I mean, I've done a few of these now with a couple of guests, and as per usual, what I would do is I would go and do a bit of research, on who the guest is, not just because I want to look a bit more smarter. I like to understand where the person's experience, how it got to the point where it's at, and the stories you want to share. And I realize you are the only person I at least personally know who has been with the IPG group since day one. You don't see a lot of those. You don't see a lot of those. I mean, obviously, you found a network that you were very, you found synergy with, and more than 20 years, I believe, right?
Yeah, so in 1999, it's a mildly embarrassing story, but I was freelancing for a number of years, and things were not going great at that particular time in the Australian market where I was living, and I just needed a place to get my feet under me for 9 months, maybe a year, and I resisted going to a health agency because at that time, health in my mind, health wasn't real advertising. It wasn't creative. There was no TV. There was no nothing. It was not. I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do, but I did want to be able to eat. So I took that job, and what a revelation! I gotta say, I had worked at that stage. I'd worked in Canada and the U.S., and I'd worked in Australia for a number of years in FMCG. So I'd sold car and beer and pizza in different places around the world, and the briefs were always the same. You could have a notebook that you carried with you from country to country, working on the same, broadly speaking, the same category, different product, but the brief and the ideas were the same. So you could just okay, we're going to page 47 and we're doing this one. It's your personal escape route. Okay, I've got four ideas for that. And when I came into health, it was amazing because the puzzles, and I think of the briefs as puzzles, and I enjoy that. I enjoy solving the puzzle. The puzzles were all different. And I had never, ever thought of this kind of a puzzle. Like, I know what it's like to drink a beer. I know what it's like to drive a car, eat a pizza, but I don't know what it's like to have end stage cancer pain. And so how do I talk to someone who's dealing with that, and they're losing their will to live, and they feel like a burden to their family. How do I say anything to that person that matters? Right? I mean, I'm coming from a place of total lack of knowledge of any of this. So you've got to dig in and you've got to do the research, and you're learning, you're constantly learning. And that's one of my favorite things. And between that change in what the puzzles were and just the individuals who I got to work with and who I got to report into, it was such a fantastic experience. I never left. I moved from Melbourne to Sydney and then back to Melbourne and then over to Singapore and then Southeast Asia and then North Asia and back to Singapore. And now I'm here in Canada for the last 6 years.
So, I
And
mean,
it's great.
when you started talking about, um, I'm going to say the variety that you were missing, the whole page 42 or however you described it.
Yeah.
At first, I was thinking, wait, is he talking about healthcare? Or is he talking about? And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because you're saying this, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, that's what we were thinking of healthcare. What are you talking about, Sean? Because the way, I mean, you cited beer and pizza and stuff like that. Yeah, but there are 200 types of beer and there's 500
Yeah.
different types of cars. And what I'm saying is and I don't, I'm speaking only for myself. Before I knew anything about healthcare advertising, I used to always think, yeah, but it's a niche thing. I mean, you mentioned late stage cancer, and I'm thinking, um, besides the technical information between one drug and the sixth drug, the way you tackle end stage cancer is limited to, besides a certain amount of decorum that you need to have, as opposed to when you're selling pizza, you can go a little bit off the rails. I mean, we're using
Yeah.
hyperbolic examples here, but I thought there were more options. But you're saying, I wonder if when you describe as there was more possibilities in healthcare, was it also to do with the fact that everything else leading up to that point, you had already been there, done that. You already knew that a pizza will always have cheese and pepperoni or whatever it is and always have a crust, whereas you didn't know anything about this niche side of advertising.
Yeah, that was a big part of it. That was the learning aspect of it, and um, it really is something that I've enjoyed the my entire career in health. It's like you learn something new every day. Often it's something horrible that you wish you didn't know, but you're constantly learning, and I'm a huge advocate of learning throughout your life. If you're not learning, then what are you doing? You have to keep taking in new things, and health is a place for that. I mean, there are new breakthroughs and new treatments and new therapies and new disease states every single day, it seems. And I found that to be very powerful for me. And you were right, in the sense that I was really feeling a been there, done that kind of thing, because I'd worked on these briefs in Canada and the US. I moved to Australia. It was, I am not joking, the exact same briefs with the same words for different, the Australian version of those North American things.
I remember at the in the early tens there was this movement on, healthcare is the not necessarily the new kid on the block, but hey, we're here, we need to be noticed and we need to have the same equal footing as traditional advertising. And I remember we were working very close during that time, and I was seeing a lot of those changes. So I guess maybe to get into a more of the healthcare on the business and the work side of things, what has changed since those days, since the early tens, around the time when I think it was, and maybe that was just the experience I was seeing from the corner of my eye, it felt like it was getting noticed a little bit differently than had it been normally done before. What's been happening in those 15-ish years since then? And feel free to go into the whole COVID and the changes after that as well.
Okay, sure. I mean, it's thinking back, and I wish you'd stop putting how many years ago this was, because it's making me feel old. So let's just say when we worked together. um, Actually, I'm gonna give you a date now. So I think that things started to change around 2008. And at that stage, I remember a meeting in Hong Kong, a regional creative directors meeting, when we were meeting with our new global chief creative officer and Jeremy Parrott. And he said, we're going to win in Cannes. And that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard come out of anyone's mouth in my entire life when he said that. And I was angry and I was frustrated and I was so many things because I felt like, okay, this guy is setting unrealistic expectation. He doesn't understand this. I'm going to get flayed for not going to Cannes when there is no way in a million years we would ever go to Cannes. And 14 years later, he was one of the architects of Cannes Lions Health. So they created a whole second show just for pharma and health and wellness agencies. So that was in 2014. So about the time that we were working together. So it really was, from that moment in 2008 to 2014, when the Lions Health first launched, there was a huge push to raise the level of creativity. And we were given permission to be creative, to push the boundaries, to push back. Given permission, we were pushed and protected at the same time to elevate the level of work beyond what had been accepted previously. And that was nothing short of amazing. It was transformational from what it had been, which was, as I said, really interesting in a personal and intellectual sense, but not terribly fulfilling in a creative sense. Like we did some cute things and some good things, but not on the same level as what I was seeing my friends and old colleagues do in mainstream advertising. So this was a push that pushed us in that direction. In 2014, when Lions Health first launched, it was the weekend before the main Lions show, and it was just for us. It was just for health. Now, you can say that that was like making us feel good, but it was also separating us from the rest of the show and not integrating it within, so that in case it didn't work, I guess they could just get rid of it. But it was a great way to dip a toe into the whole Cannes experience because nobody else was there. We finished on, I think, on the Sunday night, and the main show didn't start till the Monday. So there was hardly anybody there. The streets were not full of vomit. It was quite pleasant and sophisticated.
So this was 2014, yes?
This was in 2014.
Okay.
A couple of years later, they rolled it into the main show once it had proven itself. But and that whole moment, that was a nexus in 2008, really pushed everything to that. And from there, you saw, there was Clio Health that came out as well. There was D&AD has their own health and wellness and pharma show. The One Show had tried it years earlier and discontinued it, and they came back in with, so all the big award shows now have a pharma and health and wellness component. The thing that we saw in those first years in Cannes was that while it was our private show, there weren't a whole ton of entries into the pharma space. The first year there was just over 500 pharma entries. And
as opposed to what would have been typical expectation otherwise?
Well, I mean, they were just finding their feet, really, to find out what it was going to be. But I would expect that they're, in one of the more established categories, you have thousands of entries.
Sure, I meant within the healthcare space, you were expecting twice as much, I suppose, is what
I would have thought there would have been.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would have thought there would have been a good 1,000 entries, but it was 500-ish. I don't remember the exact number. I just remember that and that the health and wellness was twice as much at about 1,000 entries. So what I have seen over the years since then is that, you know, during the pandemic, all the big award shows shut down because no one was getting together and stuff like that. So there was a significant drop in entries into Cannes, and that's like 30% ish or so. And that has held true even up until now, even though the show's been going again for a number of years. They're still about 30% down on where they were pre-pandemic. And pharma is, it's about 300 entries last year, I think. And health and wellness was over 1,000, but under 1,500. So it's kind of held true to where it started. What I've seen, though, is that a lot of the health and wellness entries are coming from the more mainstream agencies, not the health agencies, whereas pharma is, you need to be a specialist agency to enter that category. You need to be a specialist health agency.
Sorry. So I think
Sorry, I'm just meandering around. Yeah.
no. There's nothing wrong. I think we were going to be talking about the award stuff as we go on, especially about what you just started getting into. But just before we go to that, I just wanted to finish up something because you mentioned Jeremy.
Yes.
Number one, again, I was thinking to myself when you said, "What the hell is this guy talking about?" I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking that why are we even trying? My assumption, as again you were saying, what the hell is going on? I was thinking healthcare is such a purest form of advertising. We shouldn't muddy the waters with awards being a focus. That's where I thought you were going with it. But actually, what you were saying is, hell, do you understand the type of challenge it is to straddle both, to do the right thing, and at the end of the day, there's a certain moral ground that pizza doesn't necessarily hold, versus also performing at a creative excellence point of view. But again, and this is exactly why I'm so glad we're doing this, because you're breaking a lot of these notions of what I think people in healthcare are going through and what we are thinking of what's going on in healthcare. So that's an interesting thing. Awards aren't necessarily the measure of how good your work is. I mean, we understand that, yes, it's a currency, and all agencies, mainstream or healthcare otherwise, participate in it. It's a way of, it's a show and tell. You get to show people what you're doing. It might influence and inspire others, and healthy competition is good, and that's really good. I understand that. I think before we go deeper into the award stuff, maybe touch on when I said how has healthcare changed the last 10 years, I didn't mean necessarily just with that global creative chief coming in and putting in those new great big dream mandates. How has advertising in healthcare actually changed in 10 years outside just the realms of the award shows?
That's a good question. I mean, working in different markets, you see different ways of thinking and different media channels that are the most popular. I mean, when we were working together, what we ended up doing mostly was a detail aid and a leave behind. These are rep tools that you'll go and sit with the doctor and you'll take them through a little story, right? So we did a lot of those. And we were gradually moving, and those were all print-based, and we were gradually moving into more of a digital space back then, where they would take the exact same material and just put it on an iPad or a computer. And again, because it was in Asia, and because there were a lot of reps, there was a lot of doctors in a lot of places, there was a lot of face-to-face selling. So we concentrated on selling tools that you would use that way. There were, what are we going to do for events? What are we going to give them as a little gimmick that they can leave, that that the doctor will remember us, or the nurse, or the whomever. And then what I find that we are doing now is following probably what is a lot more the standard agency model, where we're doing a lot of social posts, we're doing a lot of geo targeting to make sure that you get the messages when you go to visit your oncologist. You're going to get the right message that we want to share with you because you're within a, I don't know, a 2 kilometer radius of what we know is an oncology center. Um, there are fewer face-to-face materials, although we still make those. And when we do, it's more digital native than what we used to do. So we're making things that are purposely interactive, and they purposely are designed for the iPad or tablet environment.
Sure, but don't you think that was more the inevitability of how media landscape had changed? It,
Yeah.
regardless of whether it was healthcare or mainstream advertising, that was going to be happening anyway, right?
Well, from the vantage point of standing here in my basement in Canada, yes. But when I was in Asia, because there was so much face-to-face selling, it wasn't just in shiny centers like Singapore. It was, in the
Yeah, Manila, Jakarta, everywhere. Yeah,
well, and outside of all the major centers as well, because there's doctors everywhere.
sure.
So someone is traveling to go to meet with that doctor, and they need to make an impression because you need to prescribe our product, not the other guy's product. So much of it was face to face, and probably still is. I mean, that's a huge cost for the pharma companies, of course, is the rep force. But that face to face selling is uh, is often the best way to do this kind of thing.
When I think of any advertising, whether I call it healthcare, whether I call it pizza advertising, I still think of it's about a brief, a concept, an idea, and idea has to go out. We're
Yeah,
talking about it now as the the surrounding collaterals that are usually associated with healthcare advertising. I think maybe without going into like how media channels have changed in the last 10 years, which I think we've addressed it because of how the digitization has changed so many
right.
things and all of that. I guess I was again being a bit more purist in my question in terms of, do you think, I mean, it maybe the answer is it's inevitable that the quality of work with a more mature category will get better over time, but maybe not. I guess I'm wondering, do how about this? Um,
Yes.
talk about people who don't want to say how long ago. Back in my days. There's this back in my daysism happening in the world in all industries and categories.
Yeah.
Advertising is not excluded in this. Within healthcare, do you get back in my days, or are you seeing it being, what, it's on par with where we expect it to be, and it has gotten better, it stayed the same, we've been knocked
Mm,
back because of the pandemic? I mean, what are the, again, I don't know what's happening, so I'm hoping you can shed some light on that.
sure. No, that's a great question. In terms of the creative arc that we have followed since those early days, way, way, way back when, to where we are now, the level of creativity, there's still bread and butter jobs, right? Where just like at any agency, there's the bread and butter jobs where that is never gonna be something that you show your mom and say, look what I did. Right? It's your 10 cards, your leaflets, your whatever, the thing that just has to be the way the client asked it to be. Um, but in terms of where we are allowed to stretch our creative muscles, we are at a place that I never would have dreamed possible way back when. Like the size and the scope and the quality of some of the ideas is breathtaking. I'm so pleased with our industry in that sense of how we have managed to free ourselves from just seeing the barriers. Because healthcare and pharma in particular is probably the most restricted space to work within. And we all know that a tight brief or a very restricted space inspires greater creativity or zero creativity. So you've got to be, you either have to accept your fate and just die, or you have to be extra creative to make something work within that space. And what I have seen over the last 10 years or so is just these amazing strides in creativity. And I'm, when the as we said, the award shows are not necessarily the currency that we use. They are a marker and they have a place, but it's not awards for awards' sake. But when those shows come out and you see the work that people have done, there used to be a oh, I wish I'd done that. Right? There used to be that feeling, oh, that's so good, I wish I'd done that. Or I hate that guy for coming up with that idea. Or I had that idea, but I couldn't sell it. And then that went away because everything was just, this is not good. I don't care that won. I'm mad that it won. But now it's like, wow, I am amazed that you guys had the audacity to come up with that idea, that you somehow sold it into a client and preserved it to such an amazing degree that I'm seeing it today. And that is across, all sorts of areas, within the health spectrum, from medications for different disease states, all the way through to various health and wellness areas. And as I said, that creative arc has just blown me away. I am just amazed that we are in the place that we are in right now. And I think technology has enabled so much more of that. The things that we can do, the data that we have access to, the numbers that we can crunch, has really enabled us to step things up. And just I feel like I'm rambling, but just the amount of global connectivity that we have. Like you can harvest data and sentiment from around the world that can inform your work. Which I think just makes everything so much stronger.
I working primarily on the other side of the world than North America. Whether you're certainly in mainstream advertising, when we look at a lot of work in North America, and we see these big budget stuff, and we go, yeah, well, it's in this case, you understand, I'm talking about U.S. markets and Super Bowl level ads, and the kind of stuff that they do. We kind of look at that, and it's not an envy thing, and I think you kind of get over that. You are where you are, and that's the market you're in, and you have to work within the parameters of what you've been given. But you mentioned that healthcare is a very restrictive space purely because of what the subject matter is. That must be looking at mainstream advertising for healthcare must be like Asian advertisers looking at North American market, right? There's always like, damn, yeah, well, if I could do something like that, I would, but I can't because we're gonna kill someone, or again, I'm being hyperbolic about this, but yeah, that you must be living. You guys must live with that. Although, what you're saying is it's stood its own ground now, and it is a mature. I mean, it has been, obviously, healthcare advertising has been around as long as advertising, obviously, but in the current iteration of it, you don't have to look over across to the neighbors, keeping up with the Joneses anymore from mainstream advertising. Like you said, you are now having those moments where you go, damn, I wish I had done that it could be our colleagues from another country even, or for our competitors. That's really great. That's really something. I'm glad, because again, I have to mention 10, 15 years ago, I remember this was just this upcoming, it was bubbling into what it's obviously become now. And I think this is a nice segue into coming a little bit back to the awards, but also to do with those guys, or keeping up with the Joneses, looking over the fence, on how the pandemic had changed a lot of the pool of work that healthcare had ordinarily been exclusively working on, right? And we touched on this a little bit before, but I would like you to build on. I think it's a very interesting topic to have on how the pandemic changed things.
Sure. It feels so long ago, and at the same time, it feels like it just happened. The pandemic. I mean, we on a personal note, we arrived in Toronto on the last day of December in 2019. So we left sunny, hot, green, modern, new Singapore to arrive in cold, gray, frozen Toronto in a snowstorm. And we were here for a couple of months before the lockdowns started. Um, and then it was like, well, you don't like it outside. How about you just stay inside for the next couple of years? So we did that, and what happened in our house is mirrored around the world. It's the same thing. We all started to think about our health. We're wearing masks all the time. We're washing our hands all the time. We are carrying hand sanitizer everywhere with us. We're avoiding groups of people, but health is always on your mind. And that translated, and you would see it in social media trends on people. We're making sourdough, or we're baking, or we're cooking a big meal, or we're doing all these things, which meant that you weren't going to the donut store and grabbing a donut and a cup of coffee on your way to the office, which was everybody's breakfast, not everybody, a lot of people's breakfast, right? There was no health benefits to that breakfast at all. But you started thinking about that. Everybody was exercising at home. The rise of Peloton and other things was all about taking care of myself. It was a fashion trend, but it became about taking care of myself, getting fit, staying healthy. So gradually, through this enforced staying at home, we changed a lot of the way we thought into much more of a health focus. And I think because of that, other brands, other marketers that were never traditionally health brands have now become health brands in order to capitalize on this mindset. And I would say, and I've heard other people say it, so I'm not breaking new ground here, that every brand is a health brand now. To capitalize on what remains a part of our built-in mindset, which is this I got to look after my health. All brands have a health focus where they never used to. Now, I'll give you some examples. My car has the most comfortable seat I've ever sat in my life. It is infinitely adjustable. It is the one seat that doesn't make my back hurt. And if I could get it out of my car and have it here in my office, I wouldn't have a standing desk. I would just sit in that chair all the time. And that's a selling feature for me. It also has a hospital grade HEPA filter system. So it will pressurize the whole cabin. It will recirculate the air, remove all pollution, all viruses, everything. And there's no reason for a car to have that. Why does my car need to have that? But it does. And that's a standard feature built into the car. So that's, again, another selling point that is built solely around health. Why do I need that? Well, because there was a pandemic and there were viruses. You need a car that's going to protect you from the viruses, a bubble to take you from your home bubble to your wherever else it is bubble. And then you think about pizza, because we've been talking a lot about pizza. There's gluten-free pizza, low-carb pizza, there's lactose-free pizza. Whatever kind of health concern you have, we have a pizza for you. And beer, I don't know if you've tried it or not, but alcohol-free beer actually tastes good now. Like, there are like a million craft breweries that make alcohol-free beer in all the different varieties that you get normal beer from, and it tastes good. And if you don't mind having a beer, but you've got to drive, or you are watching your weight, or you don't want to get drunk, or you just want to hang out with people and not have to deal with all that stuff, it's an awesome option. And that never would have taken place without this new focus on health, because we had light beers, but they tasted awful. They tasted like watered down regular beer. It was never a good thing, but now it's a viable alternative. I'll buy a case of alcohol-free beer, and you can just drink those and feel fine about it. And you have You have that. I had a beer. I did something for me, but I don't have all the. You just drank a bunch of empty calories, and now you're gonna have a hangover tomorrow.
Okay,
So
so look, I think we're approaching this anyway.
yeah,
I guess. So then the question. So what is the consequence? What is the consequence to marketing? As what is the consequence of this movement, this change happening in the last 5+ years? You're right. Between my annoying friends who were doing jumping jacks during the pandemic on social media, and yes, to seeing Hyundai cars with an area that not only does wirelessly charge your phone but also cleans it with UV light. Yes, it exists. Everything is there now. It is a bit OTT, but it is there because at the end of the day, um, the thing you mentioned about a seed that doesn't need to do all of these things, but it does now, and how it works, we all understand. It's marketing. It's consumers. Consumers. If consumers can be sold on something, it will exist until it is needed. Nobody will care, even though they could always come up with it. Right? It's a market that defines it. How is this now changed? And it's a two-part question. How does it changed? Well, not marketing, because obviously we're in advertising. Let's stick to the niche part of it. How has the marketing affected the advertising within healthcare? And that's important because part two question is, yeah, but then if Coca-Cola can be a health brand, I don't know how, but I believe you. If they are able to do it, you can do anything these days. If the mainstream agency brands, and we're using Coca-Cola just as an example, now consider themselves a health brand, how does that affect healthcare advertising? Because hey, this is our pie. What's going on? Is it more a case of, you know what, there's enough of a bigger pie now to go around that it doesn't matter, or do you feel a little bit of cannibalization happening?
well, I think that I mean that's a good question because it makes sense that there should be some crossover, right? But I mean, we're talking such broadly different areas mostly, but what we're using is the same drivers to get people motivated to do the thing that we want them to do, which is buy our product. You know, we're pulling on the same things, and the part that I guess I have seen from the mainstream brands that probably uh, concerned me the most at the start was they are it was in a sense what you were talking about. They're pushing into our space, but they're pushing into the tools that we use, the emotions and drivers that we use to get people to move. And so I'm worried now about fatigue because we're all talking the exact same language, we're all using the same levers. um, it's like people just use that to get me to buy a car. Someone else used that to get me to buy this other thing. Now you want to use that same thing to get me to buy your headache medicine? I feel like I'm being manipulated. I don't know that that has necessarily happened, but uh, that was something that occurred to me when I first started to notice this shift into more of a healthy uh, space for your mainstream brands. What what I see in terms of bigger picture things from and we remember all the purpose advertising that we saw some years ago.
I love that word.
Yeah. um, I think that was again a reaction to the pandemic and the focus on everything, and that was brands trying to find a meaning, trying to find something other than the conspicuous consumption kind of story that we had been telling for so long. Um, and it has, I think, evolved into more of a space of, well, there's still elements of purpose there, people doing the right thing or people doing the healthy thing or the correct thing. And we have seen that in terms of, again, going back to the award shows, in that health and wellness category, that category is really filled up with your mainstream agencies doing work for their non-health clients that fulfills a health and wellness requirement.
So just to clarify for people who are not familiar with healthcare awards, you've told me this before, but within healthcare, it's split, not necessarily split down the middle, but it's split between pharma and health and wellness, right? And I think people who now hear the two understand the difference between. Sorry, keep going. I just wanted to set the tone for that.
No, that's an excellent thing. So the pharma side is all about heavily regulated products. You generally need to be a specialist agency to enter into that side. But the health and wellness side, anyone can enter into that as long as it, fulfills one of the categories. So that has become quite the catch-all for a lot of work that a lot of agencies have done. And that can be any brand, like your car brand can do that, your pizza brand, your beer brand, your stationery brand, whatever it is, can have a campaign that fulfills the health and wellness rules. And that has become an area where a lot of the more mainstream agencies have flourished in their award show entries, because it's not because it's not the area that they would normally work within. It's not their day-to-day work, but it is the work that they're entering into the award shows. And it can take everything from a climate change perspective to this is something to help people in this far off area of India who need this one particular thing. And so we managed to find a way to get it to them, whether it's delivery,
Very broad,
phone,
very
or
whatever.
Broad. It is incredibly wide, but you are seeing a huge array of brands that have nothing directly to do with health going into this space, doing work that is, really clever, really, really interesting. A lot of it's really smart. But it's an opportunity for them to dip their toes into a different space and show it off. But again, I think this interest in it has come from our obsession with health and our own personal health. And that is translated into what brands want to be associated with, what creative teams within agencies are presenting to clients, outside of what they're necessarily being asked for. And again, it's raising the tide, the level of creativity for everything. So now, any sort of a brand, if they're going to go into the space, has to hit a certain high water mark.
You mentioned about maybe 10 minutes ago about bread and butter work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was remembering that as we got into the topic of the two different categories within Khan, or like health and wellness and pharma being the clinical stuff, the doctor conversations, the non B2C conversations versus the health wellness, which can be anything and everything in between. Bringing the bread and butter conversation back in, educate me. I'm not saying this. I'm just wondering, what do you say to someone like me who doesn't understand what's been happening with healthcare over the last 10 years? And if I told you, yeah, so when you say bread and butter, you mean the clinical stuff as opposed to the health and wellness. What do you say to that? So the pharma, when you say health and wellness and pharma, I say, well, is that one and the same thing? Pharma is the bread and butter stuff. Like, that's not where we are going to be pushing the boundaries. Again, it's a guess it's a bias in some ways, and I'm only asking because I want you to correct me if that's not the case, or there is some truth to that, and there's nothing wrong with that either.
That's an easy distinction to make, or an easy assumption to make. Pharma is the harder side. Health and wellness can be anything, and they have substantial budgets because it's consumer health or anything. right? So there is a lot more freedom on that side. But as the old saying goes, give me the freedom of a tight brief. Give me rules, give me edges, and that's what the pharma side gives you. So if you can be creative on the pharma side, and we do see that, we do see a huge rise in the level of creativity from the olden days to now on the pharma side. It's still more contained and restrained than what we see on the health and wellness side, because it needs to be. We are talking about pharmaceuticals and we are talking about people's lives, but I see people playing with the formats, taking things that were the most mundane and boring aspects of a campaign and making them watchable, like unskippable. And it's that little insert that comes in your medicine box that you just throw away. But in the US, for example, they have to, if it's on a commercial, they have to play it for you. They got to talk it through, and there's a guy sounds like he's in an auction, right? But I have seen brands make that the most interesting thing, through the media, through the way they filmed it, putting a sense of humor into it, just making it fun. And to me, that's revolutionary. Obviously, you're not going to do that same gimmick every time, but the fact that people are thinking that way is brilliant. And I always say to my teams, if you're going to try to come up with something, try to come up with something in the pharma side. The pharma side has fewer entries because it's harder, but the reward is greater and there is a smaller pool to choose from. So if you do something truly remarkable in that space, it's going to stand out. You have a much higher chance of getting a reward. So not only are you doing something amazing for your client and for yourself, but you can receive global acclaim for that as well. So there is creativity in that space, but it's not something that most people are going to see until you need that medication or until you look at an awards show jury. Whereas on the health and wellness side, you're probably going to see the TV commercial, or you're going to see the thing at the pharmacy. So you have a much higher chance of witnessing that one thing in the wild than you do on the pharma side.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I didn't suggest that the pharma stuff is not creative and the health and wellness will invariably be more creative. I think all I was saying is in a world where you've created such a separation between the two, it's almost it almost feels like by the law of averages, it might be that a lot of the bread and butter lives on one side versus the other. I mean, I'm not making that up. I think that's an intelligent way of assuming that's what might end up happening within the healthcare category. Okay, so that's
and it's true. It's true. There is a lot. There's, I mean, obviously, there's bread and butter on both sides, but your pharma side, there's just like there's scientific data that needs to be conveyed in a scientific way, in a clinical way, that it doesn't allow for creativity, or it allows for very limited creativity. So you can tell a story, but you are presenting facts, and you don't want to sully the facts with something else. So I would say that you're right. A lot of your more bread and butter things will be on the pharma side simply because they have to be.
yeah. I just wanted to say one thing about when you were describing the coming up with in what I guess our current definition within this call definition of a good creative idea for pharma. It sometimes relies on the person or persons to look at how do you go around the legal stuff that has to be not go around but use it to your advantage. You pointed that out. To that I would say it's this is not a commentary on healthcare or mainstream. I think it's also about relationships anyway. If you're working with a pharma client in a place where your marketing contact isn't able to budge on why would you take the T's and C's and sing it, for example, right? If you don't have
Mhm.
those kind of relationships with those type of clients, it doesn't matter whether it's called pharma or not. At the end of the day, that's just doing good creative, right? I don't think that's necessarily a healthcare problem. I think the onus is on any, whether it's a niche side of advertising or mainstream advertising. That's how life works. In mainstream advertising, the same thing happens. You have ads, 95% of ads look like shit. That's law of the land. That's just how it
Yeah.
works. And I think pharma is the same thing, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that you are able to do that, and the fact that you are able to do that now. I'm assuming you would agree that maybe even 25 years ago you probably couldn't do that, just because of how pharma was being treated.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the what we considered creative back in those days is very different from what we consider creative now.
Sorry for using another year again, 25. But anyway,
Yeah, you're determined, aren't you?
I'm just recording changes, man. That's there's nothing wrong with the experiences we hold at the end of the day. And I think one of the things that's coming through quite clearly during our session here is things have gotten better in healthcare advertising for, and we need to acknowledge that for someone who might not have realized how much better it is. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, we have to sometimes talk about the number of decades that have passed us to get to that point. Thanks to health and wellness slash the pandemic, 2020, 2021, the lockdown has changed the face of brands and how brands see themselves, and they are trying to be leaning in towards more healthcare stuff. My question is a little bit about, and it doesn't have to be about IPG Health. It's a question based on an observation that I imagine we see from our colleagues. So, for example, if you're in healthcare and you have colleagues on a different floor across the other side of the office, and it's you're all on part of the same. In this case, it's all IPG, and mainstream people can come to healthcare and go like, "Hey, I need kind of help on this," and I think vice versa, depending on the type of pitch, for example, projects. Those things happen. Now, imagine it's not IPG, but let's say it's a competitor brand, but it's mainstream, right? So you're IPG Health Canada, and you've got Peloton. You mentioned Peloton. Let's say Peloton works for your competition on the mainstream side. And you've already mentioned you haven't quite seen that the mainstream people are encroaching upon the healthcare. Da, da, da. How about this? Why hasn't healthcare gone after the Peloton guys? Does that not happen? Is that just because there is a strict code that we are only going to stick to healthcare? Because at the end of the day, they have no problem roaming free. Now that the focus is on people with business intelligence within the medical healthcare field, doesn't that put healthcare agencies at a little bit of an advantage in that sense, if that is in fact the trend for brands?
Hmm. That's a good question. That's a good question. The answer is that does happen, but it happens. You're probably not aware of it in the big agency environment, and when we were part of McCann World Group, like back in Singapore, when we were part of McCann World Group, we had McCann Erickson, and then we had McCann Health, and all the different other McCann babies.
Erickson, who's this Erickson? Jeez, that was a long time
ago. But we all had our swim lanes, and those were dictated by the World Group. Like, we weren't allowed to go into,
which is why I dropped the caveat. Imagine if it's not McCann but a competitor who's not under the same role. That's the reason I deliberately did that.
Right.
I understand the swim lanes. I understand swim lanes between McCann and McCann Health. I get that. But what I'm saying is, what if it's, and I don't want to drop in another name, but let's say another brand, which is like McCann, mainstream, and they can compete in McCann Health's area now. Why doesn't McCann Health go and say, well, I'm gonna come into your village and take some of my my stuff back? Does that happen? Does that not happen? Why is that just forbidden? I mean, why?
I think it does happen. I think that we maybe don't necessarily know about it, but if there is no reason not to, then you certainly would if the opportunity came up. I can't pull out any examples out of my memory for you right now, but I remember in the past um, talking to like running shoe companies in China and whatnot about collaborations with us when we were McCann Health. And that was a very tenuous health link there because it was related to running. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. There was something I was going to say.
I think you're saying that yes, obviously these things do happen. It maybe is not as we're not aware of it as much. I think it was more in light of the change in the landscape of health being, as opposed to I think the particular example you're giving is it's a running shoe is a running shoe. It was always a running shoe. It's always health based. But now that the pizza is trying to be healthy,
what we have
our
been talking about
healthcare agencies going after pizza brands. That's what I meant.
Right. Yeah, I don't really see so much of the two-way street there. I mean, we are in the health and wellness industry, whether it's consumer health or pharmaceuticals. It's a very specialized. Like we have PhDs and whatnot who are working on all this stuff. I mean, I am not dragging those people into a pizza pitch. So we know where our strengths lie, and they lie mostly in this health space. So I think we could stretch ourselves, and we do stretch ourselves in the sense that when we're called to join a pitch with one of our sister companies who are not in the health space, then we contribute, but we don't necessarily try to take the lead. Like we're going to win the car brand. The health team are coming to save the day.
They've got that UV thing that cleans your phone. I'm going after Hyundai. Yeah, no, I get that. I was just curious because again, if it feels like it's open season now for mainstream to get into health and wellness, I just thought you guys are the experts. You should be going the other way around. Anyway, but you've answered that, and I understand. I understand what that's about. So I've got this, and let's kind of finish up. We've got about 15 minutes to go here. We obviously only connected in the last less than 6 months, and again, thank you very much for doing this. I remember I was not. It never struck me. I was thinking Sean Riley, a guy who I've known to be out in Southeast Asia, where I was working at the time. Now he's back in Canada, and for some reason, I think Canada and the stuff that we see on American TV via the commercials. You already mentioned the long T's and C's, and everything has to be explained, and the amount of media buy that American TV has when it comes to pharmaceuticals, it's not the same as Canada. You've clarified that. I never thought about it. I apologize. It's not like an Australia, New Zealand thing. I don't think Canada the same as US. Certainly not in the current climate. But I guess I assume because I've not seen enough Canadian television in general, let alone commercials. I just assume it's the same. You've mentioned that it's not. Is the distinction between? I think I know what the distinction between Canada and North America would be, and we can talk about North America, and I think we should. But is the work that's happening in places like North America? Feel free to talk about Europe and the stuff that you were seeing in Asia. How is it similar to each other or different from each other? And then let's end on the North America. The U.S. market on how they tackle healthcare advertising that's so different from everybody else.
Okay. Yeah, coming back to Canada was quite a change up from working in Asia for all those years. We only have 2 national languages here, whereas if you remember, we used to have to come up with an idea where it would work across multiple countries with multiple languages and multiple regulatory systems, which meant taking away most everything out of the headline, and everything was a visual. And
Oh, I remember that now. Yes,
right,
it's all
right,
coming back to me.
because you couldn't say it with words, but you could imply it with a visual.
Yeah,
And
try being the copy creative director. You see the frustration. Anyway, yeah, you're
That's right. What was the headline? Well, there wasn't one, but there was a picture. So coming here, I thought, okay, because I love words. I come from an art background, but I love words and I love headlines and things like that. So yes, we're going to get to do some headlines. And we only have two languages that I have to worry about, and French and English. And then I encountered what happens here with the regulatory system, and I realized that it wasn't going to be easier or more clever at all, because the things that we were allowed to say were possibly more restricted in a lot of ways than what we were allowed to say in Asia. So there are regulations, as you said, everywhere you go. There are regulations to protect the people, right? In Canada, the regulations when it comes to pharmaceutical advertising are, if you're advertising to regular people, you can say what the product is, you can say its name, or you can say what it does. But you can't say them both together at the same time. So you can say product X, think about product X. Or you can say, if you have a problem with psoriasis, you should talk to your doctor about new treatments.
And these are
But
both
you can't
D2C.
say, if you have a problem with psoriasis, talk to your doctor about product X. You can't do that.
Wow.
That's against the rule. Those two things have to be separate.
Both those are examples of D2C advertising.
Yes. Yes. So that's the rule. So, and when I said that it was more restrictive, that's what I was talking about.
Is it because of is it about anti-competitiveness?
No, it is not necessarily about that. It is about stopping people from going in and
asking for the brand to the doctor.
Medication for a specific problem. Like, if you want to find out what it's about, you got to research it.
I think I kind of meant the same thing, but yeah. Wow. So you can, and do they do both ads separately, or do they pick one over the other? It's a very odd thing. I've never heard of this before.
I know. I was a little bit gobsmacked.
So would Panadol do 2 ads, or would Panadol choose? Either we get to be called.
Panadol is different because it's a health and wellness brand, but product X, shall we say, generally will, depending on how big their budget is, they'll pick one or the other. They'll grow the market for psoriasis, or they will put their name out with someone who looks like they might potentially have psoriasis without being too obvious. And that is the choice that they have to make. Some brands, if they have a big enough budget, will do a little bit of market shaping first with the category build, and then they'll put their product name out. But generally, they shy away from that just because it's a big spend. It reminds me a lot of the early days when I first got into nutrition in Asia, and we were trying to promote different
end brand
in different markets. Correct. And there were rules that were they just seemed incredibly restrictive for no reason. Like, you can't talk about what this is for. You can say what it is, but you can't talk about what it was for or how
It
you would use it.
it can be
Ridiculous.
alluded that it's a replacement to natural, and yeah, I remember all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a supplement. You can supplement, but it was never a replacement. It was never anything like that. So the complexity and the restrictive nature of that just always reminds me of the early days uh, on nutrition and um, how difficult that was to work with, and how everyone who encountered it ended up banging their heads on the wall.
Your opinion on the American brand of healthcare advertising, not about good or bad, what do you think of the way it's been done in terms of, I don't want you to start having a political opinion on the matter. I think I'm just wondering what, if again, going back to the example, when we look across to North American mainstream advertising, we go, well, they've got bigger budgets, da, 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 da. They get to do a lot of things. They get to get Kevin Hart or whoever it is. We don't get to do that. They get to pick a Rolling Stone song. We don't get to do that. What is it? What do you see across down south from where you guys are, in that we all see what's happening in North America and healthcare advertising? And what do you think of it? Like, I mean, I have opinions on the whole Kevin Hart thing and the Rolling Stone thing, and I think most of the people who are listening to this would have it if we're all in mainstream advertising. Within your family of people, how do you guys see what they do?
It's it's something that comes up. I mean, here in Canada, we do get a lot of U.S. ads if we watch the U.S. TV, so we are exposed to a lot of that stuff. Um, the thing that always gets you is, wow, they got this person and they did that, and look at how big that set is, and oh, I wish I could have worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and oh, look, they worked with this guy and they did this other thing and they flew to that place. The budgets there are just astronomical. They are our budgets here in Canada are generally about 1/10 what they work with in the U.S. Um, so we work at a different scale. We know we are not doing those big TVCs. We know we are not doing those things. Um, I think that what we see coming out of there is exactly what you see everywhere in mainstream advertising. It's like there are some good things, not very many, but some, and there's just a lot of dross. There's just a lot of stuff that's just filling the airways and the media schedules. They spend a lot of money. It probably looks amazing. They got a great director, great soundtrack, fantastic talent, but it was never a good idea to start with. So I think it's the same as every other kind of advertising. There's good and bad. Uh, they just have a lot of money. It's all based in all the big pharma companies have a focus on the U.S. just because it's such a large market. So that's where a lot of the money lies. A lot of my friends work within those agencies in New York and Chicago and whatnot, and I know that they're facing the same problems that I face. They have more things that they have to make. They have different pressures that are on them. Yes, they do different things than what I get to do or have to do, but the the job and the outputs and the opportunities to do something good versus something mundane are exactly the same.
You're a spring chicken, but I'm old enough to remember things like Guinness horses. I'm this before my time, but I know what 1984 was. You don't have to be in healthcare, or you don't have to have blinders on to know what that is. Has healthcare, in the grander setting of high budgets and celebrity talking heads and all the rest of it within healthcare, has that yielded those kind of moments for healthcare that otherwise would never have happened if you didn't have that type of money and budgets and things behind it?
Oh yeah, I would say that it definitely has. I mean, there are some ideas that are just, they're brilliant ideas, but it's just not going to happen unless you've got that kind of backing behind you. But the thing is, you're not going to be familiar with those unless you're following the space, or unless it picks up a Grand Prix at a con or something like that, and so it makes it into the headlines. But there are definitely ideas on scale that require a massive budget behind it just to make it work.
Yeah, and look, that's fine. I've got friends in finance who wouldn't know if I said what 1984 was, but you did because you're in advertising. At the end of the day, even within your category, if you guys have those type of things happening, that's a great thing. I guess the reason I wanted to make that point at the end of the day is, we look at a lot of these big budget stuff that happens, not just in North America. You'll see coming out of Australia, you'll see good things coming out of the UK all the time, and a lot of the times it feels like there was so much of a push, whether it be financial or the client or someone gets behind something, and it doesn't have to be TV. I mean, Burger King could do really great stuff, and it doesn't matter. It's not necessarily about that, but it's about putting trust and faith in it. And North America, for what it's worth, budgets sometimes feel like it's a double-edged sword to have great budgets. As long as good work is coming out and it's pushing the agenda forward, does it really matter, right? I mean, as long as good stuff comes out. At the end of the day, I mentioned really at the top of the call, 95% of all advertising in the world is bullshit. It always will be. You can't change that. So as long as you get that 5%, that's good for everybody, right?
Yeah, as long as you're in that bit, you're good.
Mr. Sean Riley, ECD, Executive Creative Director of IPG Health Canada. Thank you so much for doing this. It's about time for you to get to work. Thank you for doing this so early in the morning. I hope your dogs got walked before this, or are you going to be doing that now? I don't want to know because there's snow outside. I don't want to think about it. I'm happy in my tropical climate. Sean, thank you very much.
No worries, man. It was great to talk. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Cheers. Talk soon.
Okay, man. Thank you. See ya.